And now we go to the second celebration today. The Apple first personal computer, which was launched on January 24th, 1984. Here it is, the Mac. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the world. I'm not a technocrat, but my first computer was this one. I bought it very, very, very inexpensively from a Salvation Army store in New York City. And without anyone instructing me, I have to tell you, I had great, great pleasure in discovering myself, what a computer is. And I did some interesting works, in my opinion, then. I was playing with it, but I think this computer also was born from a ludic mental disposition of Steve Jobs. And I would gladly buy another one, but now they are very expensive. I have one a little bit damaged. Anyway, let's say a few more words about this magical. I consider it magical. And again, I'm not a technocrat, but this little computer was done exquisitely. Yes, it was not powerful. It only had 1 megabyte memory. It was in black and white, but it was very well designed, not just graphically, but also conceptually. It has its mechanism. It was functioning very well. Everything was inside this cube, this little cube. And it had a magical program called Mac Paint. I was able, in my opinion, to do wonders with Mac Paint, and you'll see some of the drawings I did with this, my first computer that I ever bought. Here it is, the publicity of it, Apple introduces Macintosh, the computer for the bemused, confused, and intimidated. A nice publicity. On this occasion, I have to say that, Steve Jobs, I think, was an interesting man, and and not just for the fact that he didn't finish college. He only started it for a year or two at the most, and he studied calligraphy that no serious person in the world today would study. But he studied calligraphy, and apparently that so-called useless, study of calligraphy became lucrative and very usable when he designed the interface or conceived the interface of the first Macintosh. Here he is, Steve Jobs, without whom probably this little machine would not have existed, certainly not in this form. I am nostalgic, and I'm emotional when I look at it, because this small Mac, this Macintosh, it had a few variations. The first one was 128, then 520, Mac Plus, and they designed everything. It was an intentional concern which continued with Apple. As you know, everything designed by Apple is very well designed. This little machine was very expensive when it was first produced, like $5,000 in 1984 or so. Well, when I bought it from a Salvation Army store 4 years later, it was $50 and included everything: the design bag, the software, an Oki data, dot printer, and a very interesting package. It had everything. Unfortunately, I ruined it when I shipped it from New York to Chicago by plane, and it was abused, and I ruined it. Anyway, here he is again, Steve Jobs, dressed for the occasion. It was a success. I mean, we take now computers for granted, but you have to imagine, at that time, there was no computer, no personal computer. So when this thing was created, when this thing came into the world, it was, it was an event. You know, even those who are not technocrats like me, not very knowledgeable about technical matters, no, appreciated this, you know, this new baby into the world, because that's what it was. And he does look like a proud father, you know. And the truth is, this little object, the beginning of the personal computer, was so well designed that actually made it into the collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the permanent collection. This object that you are looking at right now is part of that permanent collection at MoMA, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And look at the, you know, at the creator, or one of the creators. He was probably the major force there, but there were a few others who collaborated with him. He didn't do it alone. But now the Apple company, as you know, is a huge, you know, industry. It's a giant, and that's not necessarily for the good, in my opinion. I love beginnings. As Louis Kahn said, beginnings are in harmony with the human nature. Well, this was a beginning. This was his toy, his baby. And it is like a boy, like a baby. You know, you look at Steve Jobs, and he, you know, he has this playful relationship with a baby, with a Mac. Why was it called Mac? From Macintosh, because he thought it was his preferred Apple, the Macintosh apples. But it's also the biblical reference, of course, you know, about the apple that Eve took from the tree, you know, to start the disaster called the banishment from paradise, because biting from the apple meant, you know, searching for knowledge. And the computer is, you know, amplifying our sinful life by offering us continuously, you know, information, if not knowledge, but I think knowledge too. So yes, God should be a little bit angry. I'm not trying now to say that that's why Steve Jobs, you know, got so seriously ill and died, because God was angry at him because he invented a tool that was amplifying the primordial sin, you know, related to the mythical or biblical apple. Anyway, and here is another picture. I like this picture very much. You know why? Mainly because of his socks, you know, which are, you know, it's not, I mean, I don't know who took this picture. He was probably at that time already doing well, because I see the fireplace, and maybe, you know, he was already living in a rather comfortable circumstances. I don't know if you know, but Steve Jobs was orphaned. His parents, his biological parents, abandoned him, and then he had a couple, a family that, you know, took care of him, adopted him. And by the way of adoption, the last part of this presentation will be of an emperor who was himself adopted, because his parents died very young. I'm talking about the Emperor Adrian, who was adopted by another emperor who preceded him as Emperor of Rome, Trajan. But back to Steve Jobs. I like his socks because they are, you know, they are maybe not even designed. They are not even, you know, white or, you know, excessively clean. They are, you know, regular socks for a regular person, but with a creation that was not regular, you know, on his lap. And it's obvious to me that his face expressed then, you know, joy and even pride. So now I show you some works that I did, if I can call them so, possible tapestries, which I did with exactly this little, you know, Mac. I had two. They were so inexpensive that I bought a Mac. Mac 520, I think, was called, and another one, Mac, I forgot the other name. But anyway, they both made at the same time. What I want to say is that program, Mac Paint, which was was incorporated into the hard drive of that little Mac, had a magical attraction for me, and I was able to do very interesting graphic works, just playing. Some critics criticized this computer because they thought it's just a toy. Well, you know very well, Apple now is producing very high performance laptops and computers. That was the beginning. But I think something of the spirit of the beginning, to an extent at least, continues to be present. Is that the ludic aspect, and also, you know, the fact that that little computer at the beginning didn't say no to how things looked, meaning there was a concern for design, and also for the easiness of employing it, of using it. There was a fluency. It was very well made. I know this because I worked with it. Anyway, enough with the words. I'll show you some graphic works that I did, but unfortunately I did thousands. I did many, but I lost many of them, and I lost the hard drive. I told you, when I shipped the little machine between two cities, it was I didn't wrap it up properly, and I ruined it. It was ruined. It was not handled with care, and I didn't think it would need excessive care, but it needed. Anyway, this is one of them. So these were done with Mac Paint, with this very little computer, the first personal Macintosh computer, and these were printed. On paper with the Okidata dot printer. The paper had holes, small holes on one side, and that's how you would feed the Okidata printer. And unfortunately, the quality of the image is not ideal, but you'll have a certain understanding of what I was doing with that initial, computer. And I think actually you can do architecture with it, even that program was not intended for architecture. You could design, almost absent-mindedly. It had a function of multiplying using axes, like vertical, horizontal, and diagonal at 45 degrees with mirroring and so on. And I, to be honest with you, I was happy doing this sort of thing. Maybe, from the perspective of today, they look primitive, they're in black and white, but I still acknowledge them as being mine, and I'm not ashamed of them. In fact, I show them, the printed pages to a computer wizard from California, when I was living in the States, and I asked him, do you know how I did these things, these graphic works, with what computer? But I asked him, it was like in, I don't know, 1995, 97, something like this, when the computers began to be a little more developed, but still kind of, was before the year 2000. So anyway, and he said, I don't know, I have no idea, maybe some sophisticated computer in Europe. I said, no way. They were done with with a Mac 510 or 520 called, and he didn't believe it. And it convinced me that you can do interesting works even with what is called an obsolete technology. It depends what kind of disposition you have. Again, with the same tools, two people do different works. So you can do, interesting works or less interesting works. using the same tool. When I was depressed a few years ago, I did buy one of these from Austria, secondhand, and it was shipped to me, and I did find the same pleasure, and this was after 20 something years in working with McPaint, but I was so absorbed by the pleasure of working with it and playing with it that I forgot its memory was very, very reduced, like 1 megabyte. And after a while, it stopped working. There was a message there in German because it came from German language country, Austria. I didn't investigate, but I think he was telling me that I abused the little computer and it cannot handle my experiments any longer. Anyway, so I thought that this could be interesting tapestries, black and white tapestries, because they are done with dots, you know, and literally they were printed with dots because I used an Okidata dot printer. Anyway, I will not insist any longer. I just wanted to show you some little graphic works that I did at that time when I purchased this very first personal computer.